Hello world, and thank you for joining me for my review of the first season of Digimon, formerly known as Digimon Adventure. At this point, it's only common courtesy to warn you that you are walking into an extremely biased review. I adore this show, so you can be ready for a lot of spoilers while I gush incessantly about my childhood. You have been warned. So as I mentioned before, as far as anime goes, if I had to pick one to sum up my childhood, it would be Digimon. Like so many others, this was the anime I fell in love with before I even knew what anime was. I bonded with the person who's still my best friend today over Digimon when we were 7, so yes, very biased indeed. At the start, the plot for Digimon is quite simple. 7 kids are mysteriously transported from summer camp to another world. This world is the digital world, which is inhabited by strange creatures known as Digimon, which is short for digital monsters. Each of the 7 kids is partnered with their own Digimon. If you look at this from a critical standpoint, the human characters in this show don't really do a whole lot, but the exchange does sort of work both ways. It's the Digimon's job to protect them, but shortly before entering the digital world, the kids were each given a strange object called a Digivice. And by given, I mean that they essentially fell out of the sky. The Digivices can be used to power up the Digimon, make them Digivolve, evolve temporarily to a more powerful state, but they don't work in the hands of anyone but their designated human partner. So in the beginning, the 7 are simply doing their best to get along while they search for a way home. However, things become a little more complicated with the introduction of the Black Gears, which are turning normally friendly, peaceful Digimon into destructive beasts. But this is only the beginning. Once the children defeat the foe in charge of the Black Gears, they are informed that they are part of a special group known as the Digidestined. 8 kids who have been chosen to save and protect the Digiworld. Wait a minute, did I say 8? Well, it wasn't a slip-up. On the heels of this news, they are informed that there is another member of their team who is still on Earth, which is just as well because they are soon faced with another enemy, and this time his goal is to take over the human world. This would probably be a good time to take a step back and give a brief overview of the characters, huh? Well, it's bound to lead into other things anyway. So you've got Tai, the fearless leader, Matt, who seems to sometimes be Tai's best friend and his greatest rival at others, Sora. I'm not entirely sure how to describe Sora. She's sort of like the caring, motherly figure to the group. She comforts someone when they're upset and is usually the one to break up any fights. Izzy is the brainiac of the group and rarely seen without his computer. Mimi is kind of an airhead. Joe is cautious and worries about everything. Unfortunately, for a very large part of this show, TK's character is simply that of Matt's generic little brother. So in case it was not already glaringly obvious, I watched this show in English. What can I say? They didn't broadcast it on TV in Japanese. You'll notice that with the exception of Sora, the dubbing company changed all of their names. Now here's where the bias comes in. Normally I hate this sort of thing. In my opinion, it is usually completely unnecessary to Americanize anime. Trust me, kids will still learn their names even if they're Japanese. It doesn't really bother me here for 2 reasons. One, I've been calling them by their English names for so long that to switch now would just feel strange. And 2, as far as changing their names goes, their English names are pretty close to their Japanese ones. Like they could pass as nicknames or something. Anyway, going back to the plot, the Digidestined make the journey back to Earth only to find out that not a single day has passed since they were transported to the Digiworld, but Myotismon, the enemy, is already in the process of taking over. The 8th Digidestined is revealed as Tai's younger sister, Kari. Like TK, Kari is basically depicted as the generic, kind-hearted younger sister. In the end, they defeat the threat, go figure, saving the world and reuniting with their families. But there is yet another threat, sending them back to the digital world. Now this general overview has gone on long enough. I'm sure you can guess that the kids defeat the new threat, and then at the end, our protagonists and their Digimon are forced to part ways. The first season of Digimon is 54 episodes long. This is pretty lengthy as far as anime goes, but it's certainly not the longest I've ever seen. I personally find this to be a good length for this show. It wasn't too short to get to know all the characters, but it didn't drag on and become monotonous either. However, I will say that certain points did become predictable and routine, like the beginning. where each Digidestined is given their own episode to show their Digimon's first Digivolution. I've mentioned before that no show is ever completely without flaw, and as much as I love this show, Digimon is not the exception. As a child, the opening theme felt catchy. Now I find it to be rather annoying. The Digivolution scenes get really tedious pretty fast. The jokes are corny, the dialogue is a little dated. If I didn't believe that rating systems are more trouble than they're worth, I would probably give the animation and the dubbing around the same rating. Neither are terrible, but they're certainly not amazing either. When I say I'm biased, I really mean it. This is true for most of my childhood shows, but I believe that when it comes to Digimon, the reason I still love it after all these years is more than just because it has sentimental value. If you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know that what usually sells a show for me is the combination of interesting characters and an interesting plot, and I feel that Digimon has both. I still find the plot to be engaging today, even though the target audience is much younger. Though they sometimes played cliched roles, each character had their own distinct personality and background. Overall, I feel like the characters were very realistic. They had to work to settle their differences. They didn't automatically band together and all get along in the face of the challenges they faced. I particularly liked the episodes where they were shown struggling with their inner demons, like Izzy dealing with knowing he was adopted and Matt and TK trying to make sense of their parents' divorce. For a cartoon where you usually get caught up in much more dramatic problems, this seemed very real. Digimon was such a big part of my own childhood that it surprises me how many people haven't seen it. I know a lot of people who were more into Pokemon and felt that Digimon was sort of a rip-off. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I do want to say that coming from someone who's seen both, I don't find this to be the case at all. Aside from having similar names, Digimon and Pokemon really didn't have all that much in common. The characters were completely different, and I've always felt that Digimon had a far superior and much less repetitive plot. But to avoid some sort of fan war, I'll move on. At the time of this video, both the English and the Japanese versions of Digimon can be found on Netflix. A few years ago I actually went back and was able to find all of the episodes uploaded here on YouTube, but copyright is a fickle thing to deal with, so I can't promise they're all still there. Do I recommend you watch Digimon if you haven't already? What do you think that answer is? Of course I do. But as always, that's the viewer's choice, and this video can only account for my opinion. Thank you for watching.